Good afternoon from Cairo, Egypt. This is Ala Shaheen from DARPE, Development Assistance Roadmap Portal of the Middle East. DARPE is a platform in which it shares information for tenders and grants opportunities, as well as information on partnership opportunities. DARPE platform is today is pleased to host Grant Challenges Canada to present. We facilitate, we give the space, and we are happy to have Grant Challenges Canada to speak about their current request for proposal, request for application for grants under creating hopes in conflict areas. There's a great initiative with a great project that Grant Challenges Canada is championing by serving those in need and who are suffering from conflicts in the region and the world actually, and specifically in the Middle East and North Africa region amid current circumstances. So, and this is an information session webinar, and the objective of this webinar for you guys, now we have about 110 people attending, and the number is increasing. For you, for all attendees, to understand more about the request for proposal, the requirements of Grant Challenges Canada, and what are the major winning themes and messages that Grant Challenge conflict and hope, creating hopes in conflict may require. And this information session should give you more understanding about the RFP. We still have a month to submit a proposal for this very interesting project and very interesting client who can work with you shoulder to shoulder. I would like to invite Mr. Patrick we have three people from Grant Challenge Canada. Patrick Coburn, who is the lead of this presentation, and he will talk about the RFP. He will walk you through. We have Ala El-Filah, and she is as well from Grant Challenge Canada, and we have Ziba Tassi from Grant Challenges Canada. Patrick, the floor is yours. Please go ahead and share your slides and start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ala, and welcome to everybody who's joined online for this information session on how to apply for funding for creating hope in conflicts, a humanitarian grand challenge. My name is Patrick Coburn, and I oversee the operations of the program, including the application intake and review process, as well as supporting our innovators who do receive funding throughout the course of their project period. Ala, just wondering if we need for Zeba to be able to share her screen. Are you able to do that?
Zeba, you don't know? Yes, I sure I will.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Zeba, you can share your screen. Can you share your screen, Zeba, now?
Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes, we see it. Yeah, have you shared it?
Yep.
I'm not able to see it at the moment.
Yes.
Here we go. Thank you.
Yes. We can see it now. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So, what we're going to present during this session is I'm going to give an overview of the Humanitarian Grand Challenge program. We're then going to talk about the areas of focus that our program looks at. I'll give a summary on the review process and the evaluation criteria. We'll talk about how to apply, and then at the end, we'll have some time for questions from the audience. So let's just begin just by saying who we are. So our program is a partnership between the United States Agency for International Development, the United Kingdom's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs supported by Grand Challenges Canada. So here at Grand Challenges Canada, we're an independent, not-for-profit corporation, similar in structure to a foundation. We recently marked our 10th anniversary, and over those years, we've supported a pipeline of over 1,000 innovations in more than 80 countries. So if we move on to the next slide, I'd like to talk about the problem that we seek to address through our program. So the latest figures from the Global Humanitarian Overview state that over 168 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. And among the most vulnerable are those living in conflict zones, where really traditional forms of humanitarian aid delivery are not able to reach. So our program conducted a consultation process that involved conflict-affected communities. It involved innovators, private sector actors, United Nations and humanitarian agencies, and non-government organizations. And in that process, we discussed what are the greatest needs in the humanitarian settings. So after that process, we're now looking for innovations that have the potential to create wider transformative changes within the humanitarian sector, and specifically in the areas of safe water and sanitation, alternative forms of energy, life-saving information, and health supplies and services to help conflict-affected people. The innovations that we fund must involve input from affected communities that they seek to serve. And as you may know from the request for proposals, we are giving preference to locally led solutions. And we'll talk a bit more about that later. We're also very interested in innovations that can engage the private sector as a way to increase the potential for scale and sustainability of these solutions. So if we move to the next slide, this is a representation of our portfolio so far, so the projects that we've funded to date. And as you can see on this graphic, through 2 rounds of funding, we've funded 52 innovations in 23 countries, including projects in the Middle East in places such as Syria and Yemen. Additional context here is that the innovations that we fund vary in terms of their stage of development. So some are very early stage, new innovations that have previously been untested. So these are seed stage projects, and others within the portfolio and that we're seeking through this call will be more fully developed and proven to be effective and are now ready to be scaled up. So these are the transition to scale projects. So what I'd like to do, I mentioned earlier the 4 areas that are the focus of our program. I'd like to just briefly summarize what these entail. So for safe water and sanitation, we're looking for innovations that can address challenges in clean water supply and access. So, within these types of settings, in conflict-affected settings, there might be any number of reasons why water is inaccessible to the population. So it could be changing revenue and expenditure patterns within the community and at municipal levels. It could be an increase in population size. There could be a lack of power sources, or there may be climate factors such as droughts or floods that impact access to water. And even when water is available, conflict-affected communities may have to walk long distances, often at great personal risk, to reach the source, which may then even be polluted. So safe water and sanitation, we're looking for innovations that can address challenges in getting access to clean water. Just an important clarification note here for this particular category is that we are not accepting early stage solutions for safe water and sanitation. So we're only accepting the more developed transition to scale applications for solutions that have already been proven and that are ready to scale up. So just an important note for that particular category. The next one is health supplies and services. So for this category, we're looking for innovations that address barriers related to healthcare infrastructure and healthcare workers. So in under-resourced settings, and healthcare facilities are often vulnerable to attack and have limited access to healthcare management technology. healthcare workers in these areas sometimes or very often are affected by the crises themselves and may not be able to respond, which leads to further depletion of formal and informal healthcare staff. Remaining staff may require capacity building to address new, different unfamiliar diseases and injuries that occur in these types of conflict settings, as well as capacity building in adhering to humanitarian principles. So that's what we're looking for there as potential problems that can be addressed through our program. For the next category, life-saving information, we're looking for innovations that address barriers in two-way communication. So what we're talking about here is that two-way communication can often be difficult to achieve in humanitarian settings. So communities are constantly requested to provide information to responders. However, the response and feedback from the community can often be overlooked by those who are providing humanitarian assistance. So this can lead to mistrust and frustration within the community, and which can affect the overall response. So we're looking for innovations that can improve two-way communication between communities and humanitarian responders. The fourth category is energy. So for this one, we're looking for innovations relating to the provision of alternative energy sources. So, commonly power supply within conflict settings is unreliable, it's underdeveloped and it's expensive. It's also subject to attack and it is, often insufficient to meet the needs of affected populations. And in particular, infrastructures such as schools, hospitals, marketplaces. So we're looking for innovations that can provide alternative, more reliable sources of energy. What I'd like to also emphasize that across all of these four areas is our focus on supporting locally led projects. As I mentioned, we are aiming to give preference to projects that are led from people who are within the community. So we believe that those that are affected by conflict are the best place to deliver the solutions that are needed. They have contextual knowledge and connections to the communities and are often well placed to reach those communities in insecure settings. But what we know is that traditionally in the humanitarian sector, they lack the funding and the resources to implement solutions. So if we move to the next slide, want to emphasize that we have two distinct streams of funding. So we have what we call seed funding, which, as I mentioned, are new ideas that are untested. So these are funding of up to 250,000 Canadian dollars over 18-month period. And then we have the second stream, which is transition to scale. So these are proven, fully developed ideas that are now ready to scale up. So we have funding available of up to 3 million Canadian dollars per project over, again, a period of 18 months. As well as receiving funding, awardees will also have the opportunity to receive capacity building support that can help increase the likelihood of success. So possible areas of support include publicity and marketing, networking events, mentorship opportunities, and support in partnership brokering. So I'd like now to give an overview of the review process once you've submitted an application. So all eligible applications will first go through the first stage of the review process, which is called the innovation screen. This is where project summaries from each application. So what we're talking about here is the first part of the application form for seed and the concept note form for transition to scale. These are rated on two core criteria. So firstly, we look at, is the idea relevant? So is it relevant to the challenge that we are talking about? Does it address one or more of the four focus areas that I've just described? And does it focus on communities affected by conflict? And again, is it locally led? The second criteria is on innovation. So here we're looking at, is the proposed solution truly innovative? What we mean is it a substantially new approach to addressing the problem? And does it represent a significant improvement over current approaches? And what I'd like to point out here at this first stage of the review process, last year, over 70% of all of the applications received were removed from the competition at this stage because they lacked innovation and they lacked relevance towards the challenge. So what I'd like to emphasize here is that it's extremely important to have a very clear and compelling project summary section of your application form. So with the two separate streams, there's also slightly different review criteria from seed and transition to scale. So at this initial screening stage, transition to scale concept notes are also assessed on their potential for impact, the evidence that it is a proven concept, and their scale and sustainability plan. So as well as the two criteria of relevance and innovation, we also look at these areas for transition to scale project applications. So those that sufficiently meet the criteria will proceed to the next stage. So for seed funding, those that pass this initial screen are analysed in detail by a panel of experts. So the panel is made up of a hugely diverse personnel. So we have subject matter experts, we have ethics specialists, we have private sector professionals, and probably most importantly, we have people with lived experience of conflict. So each application that makes it through to this stage is reviewed by 4 panelists and one from each of these perspectives that I've mentioned. For transition to scale stream, the concept notes that are most highly rated at stage 1 will then be invited to submit a full application form, which will then undergo further analysis by our team and additional expert analysis from subject matter experts. So only the best of these will then be given an opportunity to move to stage 3, which is only relevant for the transition to scale, which is our investment committee stage. So at the investment committee, it's an opportunity for the applicant to present their idea and pitch it to the committee to get their funding approval. So this committee is comprised of individuals who have expertise in investing, research in global health and in humanitarian context. So as I said, those shortlisted for this stage will present their ideas with the hope of convincing the committee to recommend them for funding for the larger transition to scale awards. So I'll move on now to providing a summary on the evaluation criteria that we look at for those that move through from stage 1. So the full details of this criteria are in the request for proposals that's on our website, and I'd recommend all of you who are interested in applying to review them very carefully before going ahead. I'll go through them now briefly. So the first criteria is around potential for impact. So at the seed stage, so for the smaller early stage awards, our reviewers will be looking at the extent to which the proposal has potential to generate impact through life-saving or life-improving assistance for vulnerable people in conflict-affected areas. For transition to scale stage, so the larger awards, reviewers will also be looking at the proof of concept for the proposed solution. And what we mean is the evidence that is presented that the solution works and that there is sufficient demand for it. Across both streams of funding under the impact criteria, reviewers will ask whether the proposed solution is appropriate for wider implementation in complex settings. They'll look at whether the proposed idea applies to the most vulnerable people and has potential to address inequalities that exist. They'll also look at whether it adheres to humanitarian principles and whether it has the potential to create systems change within the humanitarian sector. So does it have potential to sort of transform the way that humanitarian aid is currently provided for the specific problem you're looking at? For the next category, this is a concept called integrated innovation. And for this, reviewers will look at whether proposals are bold and novel, so whether it's something new and there's sufficient change from what already exists. And they'll look at the extent to which the proposal combines the areas of science and technology innovation with social and business innovation. So there's further explanation in the request for proposals on our definition of this. So again, I'll draw your attention to that. They'll also look at whether affected people have been meaningfully engaged in the design and testing and iterating of the proposed innovation. The next criteria is on the implementation plan for the project. So for the early stage seed applications, reviewers will determine whether the project plan is appropriate and will be able to prove and demonstrate that the idea works. For the larger awards, the transition to scale stream, reviewers will look at the proposed plans in terms of achieving scale and sustainability. And that includes any commitments from key stakeholders and any partnerships that will help get it to that stage. For both seed and TTS, transition to scale applications, reviewers will also be looking at whether there is a connection to any private sector partners. They'll look at the strength of the plan to monitor and evaluate the work. They'll look at whether there's consideration of gender considerations, environment, human rights, and whether there's a sufficient risk mitigation strategies in place. The next category is all about the team behind the project. So is the project leader and the key team members appropriately trained and experienced enough to carry out the proposed work? Also, to what extent have they demonstrated that they can draw on the expertise of other humanitarian actors and also potential private sector collaborators? And have they demonstrated an ability to understand the needs of affected people in the context? So again, this comes back to the point that we would like to give preference to projects that are locally led by people from the communities that have experienced conflict setting. The last area of criteria for the evaluation here is value for effort. This is really about, is the proposed work aligned with the funding that's being requested? Is it reasonable? And is it a thoughtful and efficient use of funding? So just a note here that for the early stage seed applications, we're looking really for a basic overview of the project spend. And should you succeed and move to the next stage, we would then work with you to finalize a more detailed budget for the project. For transition to scale, once we're past the concept note stage, a more detailed budget will be requested then, and again, we would work with you to refine that later on. So that's kind of a summary of the criteria and the way that we rate proposals. So really what's left now is for you to apply. So the deadline is November the 16th, and all applications must be submitted through our online application portal, which is called Flux. So we won't accept any applications by email. It must be submitted through the portal. And you can find instructions on how to create an account for the portal to be able to access the application form. Those instructions are online within the request for proposals. Also a note that we can only accept proposals in either English or French languages. We're not able to accept any other languages, and those that are received in other languages will not be reviewed. Another point to note is that an organization, so the institution or company that you work for can submit multiple applications. But what we do ask is that each one must have a unique person as the project leader. So an individual can only be the lead on one project, but your organization could potentially submit multiple proposals with different project leaders. Again, I'd encourage everybody to review the full request for proposals very carefully before you commence your application, and that can be found on our website, the address on the screen there. And you know, as you are going through the application, please feel free to contact us with any questions. So if we move to the next slide, we have a couple of email addresses to point you to. So for any questions related to your proposal and the request that we put out, the email address there is info@humanitariangrandchallenges.org. And then if you have any questions related to the application portal itself, so more around technical support, then the email address there on your screen is fluxsupport@grandchallenges.ca. And again, these email addresses are included on the request for proposals, which is on the website. So that's kind of concludes my summary of the challenge and the request that we put out. So I think now we're going to take some questions through the chat here on the Zoom meeting. So what I would like to do is go through questions and ask that you keep them maybe general and relevant to all of the participants on the call. And if you have very specific questions about your proposal itself, then I would encourage you to email those separately. So Ala, I don't know if you want to add anything else at this point.
No, this is perfect. I would like just to thank you, Patrick, for the very informative presentation. And it's a very good, the most important thing that I have noticed actually, that you are looking for good ideas and workable ones, and not only workable and but meaningful. Meaningful means that it is really delivering the services or the outputs or to the most vulnerable and those in conflict, and to make sure that it's impactful and the impact creates sustainability. And I'm so happy to see this again from Grand Challenge Canada, this kind of different layers of evaluation. And this means that you are looking for thoughtful ideas. And actually behind any good proposal is a thoughtful idea. This is a general theory. So this is what you are looking for. And it's interesting that you have this all transparency and accountable process for people to be attracted and to actually think of solutions for those people in need that we would like to serve. And here is a partner that can partner with you and support you from the seed stage until the scalability stage. Go ahead, Patrick, just read the questions and go ahead with that. So you have 19 questions actually, and there's someone who's raising his hand as well.
Okay, I'll go through some of the questions that have come through on the chat here. Let's see. So we have one from Mohammed Aslam. Can an NGO apply for both innovation and TTS? I think perhaps you mean, can they apply for the seed and TTS streams? Yes, as I mentioned just towards the end of the presentation there, an organization such as an NGO can submit multiple applications across both streams. What we do ask is that the project lead, so the person who is really leading that application, is unique for each one. So again, an organization can submit multiple proposals under either stream, but the project leader, so the person who is leading that project, must be unique. So I hope that answers that one. Another question from Patrick SD. How many projects will be funded in the seed, funding and scale stages? What is the average amount that has been funded previously? So yeah, good question. So for this round of funding, for the seed stage, we're looking to fund up to 15 projects. And for the transition to scale stage, we can fund up to 8 projects. So to give you a bit of a sense of how it's looked in previous rounds, so we've received over 600 applications in each round, and really we've funded around about, I would say, 25 for each round in total. So out of over 600, 25 have received funding. So that gives you a sense of the level of competition and the success rate. But I hope that doesn't discourage you. So that gives you a sense of the numbers. So 15 for seed under this round, up to 8 for the transition to scale stage. Elizabeth Filippouli, what classifies under life-saving information? So for this one, it's, as I said, we're looking for innovations that can help with two-way communication between humanitarian actors, so responders, and the communities that they're responding to. So, you know, what we funded previously are often technical innovations around how to capture feedback from the communities and process it in a way that it can be acted on. So, you know, we've seen apps that are gathering information and maybe translating them from local languages to languages that humanitarian actors can process. We've also seen how there's been other things that we've funded, technical solutions around sort of early warning systems. So we've had innovators who have provided a service to the communities to warn them about potential airstrikes in the area ahead of time so that they can get to safety. So it's that communication between humanitarian actors and the communities that we're serving that we're looking for. So it's quite an open, broad scope for life-saving information. And again, in the request for proposals on the website, it talks a bit more about that. And you can also look through some of the things that we funded previously, also shown on our website, to see what types of things we're talking about. But really, it comes down to that two-way communication thing. And we're open to any kind of new, innovative ways of achieving that.
So Patrick, for the warning system, this warning system from strikes, this should be very scalable to the MENA region now. So you should be working in Yemen, should have it in Libya and Palestine. Is this right?
Yeah, I mean, they're already working in Syria, this particular project, and have recently started moving into Yemen as well. So yeah, it's very prominent work that they're doing.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Let's see. So from Saeed Sabri, how is the eligible organization that can apply? Can a private sector organization be a co-partner? So yes, absolutely. We encourage partnerships with the private sector, and really we are interested in new ways of providing humanitarian aid. And one way that we see is that if we can engage with private sector actors, that can help move things more sustainably and more quickly through the system. You know, making use of the private sector's access to markets and the distribution networks that they may have can really help accelerate the impact of a project. So can a private sector be a co-partner? Absolutely. A private sector organization can also be the primary applicant. We're very interested in projects that bring in the private sector into humanitarian aid. Rehman Khan, any specific countries that would be considered or prioritized? So we do have a list of countries included in the request for proposals. So, you know, it has the kind of, I guess, the major conflict affected regions that you would expect to see in there, such as Syria, Yemen, Democratic Republic of Congo. The list is there on the website, but we deliberately try not to be too restrictive around that. What is important to us is that the innovation is serving communities that are affected by conflict. So we look to the applicants to really give a compelling story of why this community is affected by conflict and why your solution can help them. We do have a list of countries, and encourage you to have a look at that and to get a sense of what we're interested in. But the key for us is that the communities that are being served are conflict affected, and this could mean people that actually live within conflict zones. It could also mean refugees who've left a conflict affected country but are still in need of humanitarian support. So again, encourage you to read through the definitions that we have on the website, but I hope that that helps with a bit more context there. Imad Hussein, regarding health, can electronic medical record system be considered as an innovative idea? So absolutely, you know, in many of these contexts, the medical records system is failing, or in some cases non-existent. So if there is a creative way to create a robust medical record system that's going to improve the lives of the people in those regions, then we would be open to considering that. It would need to be something that's an improvement on what exists already, and we'd look forward to reading any proposals that have ideas to do it better. So just going through, I want to make sure we pick up on some questions that may be relevant to others. So can you give a sample? This is from Tahani Abbas, a sample of your project, please. So as I said, I would draw your attention to the website, which has a profile on all of the things that we've funded to date, and that would be your best resource to see the types of things that we've funded previously, which may get some ideas flowing for your application. So from the Arab Women's Organization, could an intergovernmental organization apply for grants that you offer? So we encourage applications from all types of organization, and you'll see that in the request for proposals. So in some cases, it may be difficult for us to fund government actors. You know, often if I would still recommend submitting a proposal, because sometimes we may be able to go through another partner that you may have to receive the funding if it becomes a problem with funding a government type of organization. We also know that for many United Nations types of organizations, it's difficult for them to accept the terms of our agreement. So what we suggest again is that applications should come from a partner who is maybe a local partner who can receive the funding, and then the UN or the intergovernmental organization can act as a collaborator on the project. So not necessarily the direct recipient, but someone who is acting as a partner for a local organization. Mohammed Aslam, when we speak about private sector engagements, profitability comes in. How do you view this? So it's a good point. I think when we talk about private sector, you're right, people often think about profit. That's not necessarily what we're saying here. I think what we're talking about really is sustainability. So how is a project able to continue and to continue to be successful once our dollars have been spent? So in that sense, you're talking about, are there other partners who can then provide funding or support or resources beyond the funding that we provide? So, you know, it's not necessarily the case that a a revenue generating project is what we're interested in. What we're more interested in is something that can be sustained on a continued basis for as long as the solution is needed. Sometimes that might be profit making, and sometimes, you know, the buyer may not be the end user. So the people who are affected by conflict may not have, you know, the money or the availability of resources to pay for a service, but a humanitarian aid organization might have those resources. So, you know, actors who international non-governmental organizations might be the buyer for your solution. So you would receive funding to sustain the work that you're doing through those buyers, and not necessarily through the communities themselves. So I hope that helps a little bit in framing that. But again, there's more on this online by what we mean by private sector engagement. And again, Tahani, yeah, do projects cover Sudan? Yes, Sudan is, again, somewhere that we have funded previously, and is still a relevant context for us.
Patrick, we have about 50 questions in the questions and answers section. Do you see it?
Okay, yes, I see it now.
But this is 50 questions, ma'am.
Well, what I would say then, if I don't get to your questions, apologies for that, and please do email us after this call so that we can address your question. I'll try and get through some of these now. Okay, so an anonymous question: would access to higher education be considered under life-saving information, or are you looking for items related to health? So what I would say is that it's not necessarily related to health. In that sense, it's fairly open. But what I would say is that we aren't really interested in funding educational programs. So you know, if it was a purely an app that is providing education, it may not be something that we're interested in. I think it's more around sort of critical areas, like I mentioned, the early warning systems for airstrikes, that type of thing. So I think purely educational projects are not really the aim of the program. Rana Dajani, how about solutions that are holistic and therefore may target more than one of the categories at the same time? Absolutely. We know that, you know, for example, a life-saving information project may be related to health, and that's wonderful. And we expect there to be overlap between these things. You know, there may be a project that provides alternative energy for a hospital. So again, there's a link to health as well. We absolutely encourage solutions that can be across all of these sectors. So yeah. Can the proposal be a capacity building with end result being creating jobs for vulnerable groups, for example? So I would say that creating jobs is certainly a way to improve the lives of people who are affected by conflict. And we do fund projects that is one of the outcomes is to create jobs like that. What I would say again is that it would still need to be related to one of the four categories that we're talking about. So yes, creating jobs could be one positive outcome from an innovation project, but again, it must relate to the areas that we're interested in. I've answered some of these already, so I'm just going to scroll through and pick out some more. So from Hannah Kuvalainen, do transition to scale projects have to be funded previously? Sorry, I think I've lost that on my screen. I think you were saying, does it, for transition to scale, do they need to be funded previously by us in order to qualify? So the answer is no. What it has to be is it doesn't need to have received funding from us previously, but what it does need is to have been proven and have sufficient evidence that it works and is ready to be scaled up. So there's no restriction on applying even if you haven't received funding by us previously. Maria Kozachenko, is Ukraine eligible? Again, we do list some countries on the website. It's really up for the applicants to persuade us that the area that you're looking to work in is a relevant context and that the population that you're working with has been affected by conflict in some way. From an anonymous attendee, will you fund an organization that has not worked on humanitarian causes before? What I would say is that at the seed stage, you know, these are early stage projects in development, and I think perhaps at that stage we would be open to considering an organization that maybe doesn't have that experience yet, but is looking that has a really innovative idea, and that maybe they can partner with organizations that that do have experience in humanitarian causes. I'm just seeing some other questions. So in the chat from Nuha Yaferni, how about interventions focusing on reinforcing services on mental health and psychosocial support? Yes, that would certainly fall under the health category for this call. Mental health is obviously a very relevant and needed service for the conflict affected community. So that would be something we would be interested in, certainly. And just again, apologies if I'm missing your question. I'm just trying to manage the multiple questions that are coming in, and we can certainly take questions by email as well after this call.
Actually, Patrick, all these questions are recorded and registered at the Zoom, and we can send you the list of all the questions have been asked. But still, these are a lot. So I think I prefer what Patrick has just mentioned now, that everyone who has a specific question directly go to the info and the emails are listed in conflict, creating hope in conflicts and grand challenges Canada, and directly ask questions. But Patrick, what Patrick is doing is trying to find the most repetitive questions upon demand, so to be able to answer as much as he can.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Ala. So another question from Patrick SD on when will the funding start? So what we are scheduling at the moment is that projects that succeed through this call, whether it be at the seed stage or the transition to scale stage, will commence in summer of next year. So the review process takes us through to around about March 2021. And at that point, we will then inform the successful applicants and then enter into a grant negotiation process. And that typically takes around about 3 months to complete. It also includes developing project budgets, developing milestones, and agreeing to milestones over the project period as well. And again, these timelines are laid out in the request for proposals. But so March would be the time when successful applicants will be notified and will move through to finalizing the agreement with us. And then in the summer of 2021, projects will commence. Rem and Khan, do projects have to be only service delivery, or are research projects also considered? So we're not really in the business of funding purely research projects. We do want to fund projects that will go into the field and will be implemented within the communities that are of interest. Sarah Gallagher, are organizations eligible to apply if they already have GCC funding? Yes, you are still able to hold a grant through this program if you already have one through another, or what I would say, it would probably come back again to what I was saying earlier about an organization can submit multiple applications, but the project leader needs to be unique and able to kind of commit sufficient time in proportion to the activities that they're proposing. So Sana Shahid, if an organization is submitting more than one application, do they need to be submitted from the same account? So each project lead would need to create a individual account in order to create the application, and then we would link you to the same organization when we process that. A couple of questions from VJ. First one, seed innovations in conflict, can they be tested in some other place for the seeds proof of concept stage? So, primarily we're interested in projects that will be tested in conflict settings. And if something has already been tested somewhere else that's not conflict affected, we would still want to see that tested in a conflict zone, because there may be very different considerations and contextual differences that can really change the way something is delivered. So our primary interest is indeed to fund things that will ultimately reach a conflict setting. There may be an initial stage where it's tested somewhere else in a more stable context to first figure out ways of implementing the project, but then ultimate goal is to bring that to a conflict setting, and as I say, to adapt to some of the very different contextual things that happen there. I think I covered the question on numbers. So looking to fund 15 seed projects through this call, up to 8 transition to scale are the numbers that we're looking at right now. So Joseph, do we submit the proposals for seed and scale up by November 16th? Yes, that's the submission date, the deadline to submit your proposals. Just again, I'd like to clarify the difference between seed and transition to scale, the 2 different streams. So for seed, you will submit a full application form, For transition to scale, slightly different process where it's an initial application form, a short form, and then the ones that rate at the highest will then be invited to submit a full proposal. So slightly different process for the two streams, and please do read through the instructions online before you commence an application. But yes, deadline again is November the 16th for submission. So a question from Belinda. You've mentioned that capacity building may be funded, but the RFP seems to take the opposite. So I think what I'd like to clarify is that we're not interested in purely capacity building projects. There must be a link to the core sectors that we're looking at. So I guess one of the best examples there would be capacity building for health care providers. Do you have a new way to strengthen the informal and formal health sector workers and build their capacity that can lead to ultimately to impact in health outcomes for the population? So purely capacity building we may not see as being innovative, but is there an extra thing that's different about the way you propose to do it that really makes it something new and innovative? But purely capacity building, I don't know if we would consider that to be truly innovative. Things like educational programs, it would have to go beyond that to be something that we would fund. Maybe time for one or two more. So Patricia Dorscher, can I talk a bit more about private sector involvement? What types of entities would be considered as private sector? So yeah, very good question. When we talk about private sector engagement, as I said, we feel that the private sector may have certain capacities that the public sector may not have. So distribution channels, as I mentioned, marketing expertise, that type of thing that can help elevate a project and maybe bring it to a population more rapidly than the existing system. And private sector can be anything from, a local business in the region where you're working that can help with distribution or manufacturing to a larger tech company, for example, that can help develop an app or something along those lines. So there's all different ways to interpret the private sector engagement, but ultimately we're interested in ways that can help accelerate an innovation's impact, and we feel that private sector could be a good channel for that. So Allah, I think we're at time now. I'd like again to just thank everybody for attending and for your questions. And again, the email addresses are available. Please don't hesitate to reach out with questions by email, and we'll do our best to support you through the application process, and look forward to seeing and receiving some really innovative ideas that can really improve the lives of people who are affected by conflict. So thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for your very innovative, very informative presentation, and that capacity to be able to handle all such questions lively. And I would like to thank everyone. And I think this is still we have a 1 month. Everyone has a 1 month for applying for a proposal. Still, you have time. And Grand Challenges Canada, I think, is ready for. If you send an email to them and you start discussing your ideas, maybe there will be kind of understanding and give you an answer for your all inquiries. They are looking for good partners, I believe. And you guys, NGOs, local, international, local NGOs in the region and the world, also looking for good clients. So good clients with good partners. This will be a great equation. So be ready, read between the lines, understand the request for proposal, and come up with your ideas. And I hope that this webinar is helpful. And by the way, just to let you know that the recording of the webinar and the presentation will be published by Grand Challenge Canada on their website, as well as it will be published on DARPE website. And so you can review it and listen to it at any time you want. So it could help you more in writing a responsive, compliant proposal. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Ala. Thank you, Ziba. And thank you, all the attendees. Thank you so much. And have a nice night from Cairo. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.